What you think of something is often how you will use it. So I know that things come with names, a broom, and it comes with instructions and what you're supposed to use it for, like sweeping. But if we see the broom as a weapon, we will use it as a weapon. That its intention was to use to sweep, but sometimes depending on where we are, the state of awareness, we can use something opposite of its intended purpose. And so, my question today on March 26, 2025 is, what is the intended purpose of children? I knew what I wanted to talk about, but I didn't quite know how I was going to articulate that. But I love open-ended questions because they often help drive us to the root of our actions. What, why, how, when are often how we preface those questions, right? Those deeply rooted answers that we seek. Because if you look at the world and you look at see what's going on in the world, and I think about my children and the experiences that they have had, I think about history. I think about my grandmother. I think about people marrying at 13, having children at 14, 15. I think about sexual abuse, misuse, children getting pregnant at 10 years old, 11 years old, 9 years old. I think about abuse, neglect. I think about where people have been beaten up by family members. I think about the children that have died as a result of feeling like not you don't know, but having someone feeling that they had a weapon on them, right? So when I think about the world, I can't help but wonder, and this is probably a childhood question that I had, even with my experiences with the generational cycle of pain, is that what are children for? And I shared in one of my podcast, actually, I think on Monday when I was doing live Facebook, and I was talking about purpose and I was talking about temptation. But when I think about the purpose of children, when I think about what they're here for, there is information to let us know their purpose. And then I was actually thinking about the commercial that I saw that I seen this past weekend, and it said that how we don't come with a roadmap, we don't come with instructions, and in actuality, we do. We actually have instructions. And one of the things that I refer to is the Bible. I remember thinking as a child that children are miracles, that to actually think about a birth, to think about egg fertilization, and to think about that it's like when you blow up a balloon and the balloon is meant to be some shape or some animal, but you can't tell when the balloon is flat or in a what do you call it, unwakened state. You can't tell how that shape will come about. But it's when you start blowing in air, or when it starts formulating, then you start seeing the shape of that balloon, just like the shape of a human being. You start seeing their nose, their eyes, their ears, their things that you don't see, their nervous system is forming, and all of this stuff. And you think about the heart and its job, its function as we understand it, to pump blood throughout the rest of the body, have spiritual, every organ has some type of spiritual meaning too as well. But how these organs work together to keep the body in harmony, right? When you look at genes and of course there are things that can happen throughout that process, as we found over time in the medical industry, that if you don't take, your vitamins, folic acid, it can lead to neural tube defects, right? It can lead to the nervous system not forming the way it needs to. But when we think about the amazing thing of the body and how it does what it does, there's something that created that. I know I would. believe without a shadow of a doubt that it's not a human being, it's not a scientist that I told my children today. I don't think there was a scientist in me saying, "Hey, okay, I'm gonna make Cameron, and this is how I'm gonna design it." Something higher power designed my children because I tell them, I didn't design you. I had nothing to do with that. I carried you. I nourished you through nourishing myself, but I didn't design you. And so there's some power that is out there. And I've learned to call it God. That's what I was raised with. And I also said that it's not about what you call this power, but it's what you believe in. Do you believe in doing good? Do you believe in doing right things? Do you believe in evil? Do you believe in hurting people? Your beliefs are basically how you express yourself. Through your beliefs, you express yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially, how you treat other people. It's through your beliefs. And when we get to children, how you treat children or how children treat children, all we have to do is sit back and watch, like my grandma said, just sit back and observe. And, I've talked about how I know that, children don't come out of the womb talking about divisiveness, talking about prejudice, talking about hate, talking about killing people. They're trying to gather their words together. They don't talk about those things. That it's a belief system that is impressed through them, which we call socialization, to basically teach them a way of being, right? Teach them our way of being. And so when I think about children, their intended purpose, and we look at the Bible and Bible verses, and Psalm 127:3 says, "Behold, children are a heritage of the Lord, the fruit of the womb, a reward." And so they are not meant to be anything less than that. So anything less than that would be not reminding them that they are more than their experiences. Anything less than that would be encouraging them to be fearful, afraid, encouraging them to dislike certain people. Because when I think about a heritage of the Lord and the fruit, a fruit is something that to me is something that is something that you get from nourishment, right? Something that nourishes you. And children, I believe, part of their role is to help remind us of who we are because they're so close to the creator. They haven't gone through the things that we have gone through. And just like I did as a child, I looked at my father when he was angry and I was like, what's the matter? What's wrong? Like this isn't the way that life is supposed to be. And so there's another one that I believe that's another verse that I was looking at. And it talks about in Matthew 19:13, and when he talks about that the children are the kingdom of heaven, and that goes along with saying that they don't have all the stuff that we have. They come in here fresh. And so it is an opportunity to sow seeds in them that elicit fruit, that elicit mature fruit. Children are not for us to put our unfulfilled dreams on. They are not here to do the work that we didn't accomplish. We are here. Everyone has their own purpose to do. Now, if a child decides to go in that field, they can also change how they interact in that field. Like Dr. Phil had mentioned that about his father, and he realized, after working in that field of psychology, he realized that wasn't the way that he wanted to live his life. He wanted to do something other than that. So, but impressing or forcing our children to be something that they are not is again not using them for their intended purpose. And so it's so important when we talk about career, we talk about life goals, that we ask them and say, "Hey, what do you want to do? What do you want to be?" It's not about what I didn't accomplish. And I think it's important, yeah, that we can share things that, share our life experiences. That's what we do as a guide in helping them to evolve, to go beyond us, but also to ensure that we are listening to them. Because again, they're closer to God. And again, they know, they have an intuitive knowing and clearer to this intuition that I know why I'm here. So as far as us Guiding them is actually as a guide, as a teacher, we help them to unfold themselves instead of forcing our careers, goals, dreams on them. They're not here to just pick up the we're not here to live through our children. We have our own lives and we live. Children are not here to project pain on. They are not here to because and it's one thing, when I talk about projection of pain, and I've been writing about that, and healing from the inside out and cultivating your mind, is that there are a few reasons why people tend to project pain. And I believe one of them is that they don't want to feel alone. They feel so hurt. They want people to hear them, to have to, and sometimes people do that through actions, whether it's hitting, kicking, fighting. When you talk about bullying behavior, it's a way of expressing their pain to another, right? Because pain knows no boundaries. Pain doesn't see you. It's like foggy mind. It just wants to express itself. And unfortunately, often that is in the form of projected pain, hurting someone, limiting their freedom in somehow. And I believe that it is so important as adults, as human beings, that we realize, we acknowledge our pain so that we can heal ourselves, so that we could be present for our children. Because if we don't, we continue the cycle of pain. So our children are not here to project pain on others, but they are here to be the light. They are here to be the light in darkness. They are here to achieve or fulfill their divine purpose. I believe also for children that it's so important that we remind them daily of who they are. They're not here to go without that knowledge, because I believe that, as the word says, that God put his laws in our hearts and our minds. And if that is so, then it is our role as a parent, a caregiver, to daily nourish those truths that are inside our children. They're not here just to go haphazardly and say, okay, have no direction. We are here as their guide. And there are many children that feel like they have no direction. They don't know what they're doing. So they're doing stuff that is unbecoming of them. They're talking about their body parts. They're making lewd, some people are making lewd comments. And what we see in adults, that didn't just happen overnight. It's something that was constantly fed in them and never interjected with the truth that your body is more than just a physical presence, is actually the temple for the Holy Spirit. That we are to care for our bodies. We are to avoid to not gluttonize, or not to just eat. Eat is eating. We don't live just to eat. We eat to continue to nourish the bodies that we have. And so when we think about children, we think about their identity, and we think about what's going on in the world, we have to ask ourselves, how do I see children? Do I see them as something that is here to just do my bidding and to continue the hate in the world, divisiveness? Or do I see them as another divine spirit here to do work? And it's kind of hard to see children as light, as spirit, if we don't see ourselves like that. So I know I started this conversation with asking, how do you see children? What is their identity? But often, too, again, how we treat something stands for our own beliefs. And how you believe about yourself is often what you often transfer to what you believe about children and how you treat a child. And it doesn't have to be just your child. It could be anyone's child. Do we see children as thieves? Do we see them as bad people? Do we see them as names, curse words? Because again, how you treat them. And you think about an innocent child here, and I know as me and probably as you, when you got into this world, you were excited. And it's like you learning, you touching, you're feeling, you're learning what this world is about. And you look to your adults as people that are show you the world. And if you remember yourself like that, because I didn't want to forget myself, even though I went through some projected pain, I still, through my emotions, I remembered who I was. I remembered what I didn't want other people to feel. I remember the excitement of being here, being alive, of feeling the sun on my back, of feeling the air, the breeze, smelling the rain, my feet going through the grass, And I remember things like that. And it saddens me when I think about a child that come into the world and their pain is being projected on them, whether it's over violence behavior, whether it's name calling. I can't tell you times where I've been around and I've heard people call children outside their name. And I then you wonder when your children go through stuff in the school and they have other children that are calling them that, where the children get where they get it from. And so I know what it's like to be angry. I know what it's like to feel frustrated. I know what it's like to be scared. Are you going to be enough? Are you going to provide enough for your family? And I know often fear feeds anger, feeds frustration and resentment and bitterness and pain. But if you can just remember the great gift that we have as children, the great gift that we have of having to guide a child, of having to not repeat the same behaviors. That's another thing. Do you believe that children should go through what you went through if you went through pain? Or do you believe that my children are going to have a better life than me? Do you see children as this is an opportunity for you to break the cycle of pain versus continuing it? And so I think it's so important that we ask ourselves not just, how we want to raise our children, but what are our beliefs about children? What are our beliefs about their identity and their purpose and what they're here for? Because I do believe that as parents and caregivers, caring for our children, caring for a child is part of our purpose, guiding them, sharing our experiences, loving them, showing them love in all realms, listening to them, engaging with them as much as we can. And it's a process. It is true a process. But it's so important that the child knows that we love them, that we're going to do our best to care for them, and that we're here to listen to them. Because there are so many children that are looking, you see these lost signs, missing children. And there are so many people that are looking for love still in the wrong places because they're not getting it from the people that are supposed to love them the most. So I just thought I would share that with you. And I think it's so important, ask that question. And it's so important to again assess your beliefs about yourself, your own life, to assess your belief about the projected pain that you've had, to assess your beliefs about you as a caregiver, as a guy. What are those qualities, those things that you are to do when you have a child involved? Because everything stems from our beliefs, our ideas, our identity. And remember that collective consciousness reflects individual consciousness. The problems we see in the world didn't just happen again overnight or didn't just happen with a group of people, but it's the individual thoughts that make up the issues that we have going on. And if we can just turn those thoughts, dismantle those thoughts, and root them in love, which is the Great Commission, we are to love, even with our children, because they are made in the image of God, just like we are. And so every time we look at a child, we're looking at God, his expression through human form. So again, the question I ask you is what is your idea? What is your thought about a, a child or children? And what thoughts do you need to change about what you feel about a child? And how can you show that? How can you show love? How can you break the cycle of pain? Everything that you've gone through and really show that and allow your child to help you remember who you are by observing them, engaging with them, talking to them, sharing your thoughts appropriately with them. How can we change or dismantle the cycle of pain? And we do that through love, remembering who we are and helping our children to remember that through not just our words, but through our actions. This is Tamika Chambers with Create a Generational Love Cycle. I hope that you too will see that the cycle of pain does not have to exist, that you have the divine right, the power, the ability, the permission to create a generational cycle of love.